Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be diving back in to the Dark Eldar and, seeing where they're at after the last balance change. So, the thing about the Dark Eldar is they've been in kind of a rough spot all edition. They don't have the most unit selection, and I think that's mainly the reason why they're doing so poorly in general. They are doing much better with the Sky Splinter Assault detachment because it's absolutely fantastic. But the thing that's, keeping them from being probably one of the, top three factions in the game is just because they have such a lack of unit diversity. And the units that are good in that detachment are, kind of far or few and far between, I should say. So we're going to kind of see where the Dark Eldar are at. In my honest opinion, I'm going to tell you guys, what tiers each unit I believe belongs in. And we'll go from there and we'll kind of discuss the, kind of advantages and disadvantages to playing Dark Eldar in 10th edition and maybe what they need to, be a more complete and full faction. Okay, so right off the bat, just a quick disclaimer. This is from Tier Maker. There's a couple of images on here that are just extras. We're just not going to worry about those. I have all the units loaded up here, so let us begin. And I think the best place to start would be with the Archon. Now, the Archon is a pretty menacing model. It looks awesome. Where does it belong competitively? Well, the Archon's an auto-include, basically. Especially in Sky Splinter Assault, but it's also really good in the other detachment. So, why is... or Real Space Raid is the other detachment. So, why is the Archon so good? Well, giving his unit full rerolls to wound is fantastic, especially when you combine that with the fact that they're getting the Lance key roll when they disembark from a transport. You can use stratagems to allow them to, get out of a transport after it moves and then still be able to charge. So the Archon's an obvious choice for that. The Archon's also pretty durable with the 2+ invulnerable save. It does go away once you fail it, but the Archon, obviously is pretty durable with that 2+ invul save. Does a lot of damage himself as anti-infantry 3+ with a damage 2 weapon. And overall, just a very good unit. Also, has a Vect ability, which basically increases the CP cost of a battle tactic stratagem from your opponent, which is also really good. So I think in general, the Archon's a very good model. People are running, 2 or 3 of them in competitive lists, competitive Dark Eldar lists, with Incubi for that exact reason, because they just are so good at buffing your army, and they're, they have some useful utility abilities as well. Okay. Next up, Drazar, and I think Drazar is B tier. Now, some of you may disagree with this. Drazar is a beast. He does good damage in combat, but in my opinion, it's nowhere near what Lilith can pull off. And he doesn't quite buff the unit he's with, the unit of Incubi he's with, in the same way that an Archon does. And for that reason, I think he's a little bit less desirable in a list. That's just me, though, I just think he's not a consideration for, if, for example, you have to choose between an Archon to join a unit of Incubi and Drazar, mostly you're going to pick an Archon. The advantages of Drazar are that he has precision, right? And he gains extra pain tokens, I believe, from killing a character with precision, which is good. But, is that enough to warrant taking him over an Archon or over something else in your army? And I really just don't think it is. He is a cool model, though. One of the newer models, really awesome. And, as an Eldar player, I love the idea of the, Fallen Phoenix aura, and I think that's why Drazar is so cool to me. I used to run him a lot. I had an old Drazar model back in 5th edition, and I had quite a bit of fun running him with the new Incubi. So, I have good memories of him, but he's just kind of middle of the pack. Nothing special, but also not terrible. Incubi are probably one of the best units in the index right now. They're in S tier, and that's because they do insane amounts of damage. I mean, the damage calculations of them coming out, getting +1 to wound, getting an additional -1 AP on their attacks, rerolling all hits, rerolling all wounds. It just absolutely insane. Factor that into, well, also factor in that they do battle shock to units that they charge into. So if I charge into a unit, they fail their battle shock test, that is a pain token for my army, and that's going to keep me going. So basically, I feel that incubi are what your army should be revolving around when you build a Dark Eldar list in Sky Splinter Assault. And they're still good in the other detachment too. They're not as good, but they're still fantastic, right? Because an Archon can join incubi, they're getting, full rerolls to wound, full rerolls to hit. The only difference is they're not getting the Lance key roll in, real space raid. So, a little bit of a trade-off, but they're still really solid in both detachments. Nothing to complain about there, and they just are very cost efficient as well. They're not that expensive. All right, next up, Razor Wing Jet Fighter. And I think this is B tier. I actually think a lot of people think it sucks, but it's pretty good. It's basically the only way the Dark Eldar have to interact with models behind obscuring terrain, being a flyer. It does decent damage against ground troops. It has a couple of Dark Lances. It has some missiles, which is good. You always want to carry those missiles around. The missiles are not bad. They have poison. You can do, well, mostly anti-infantry is probably what you're going for, because the Razor Wing Jet Fighter has +1 to hit against targets on the ground, which is good. It is a little expensive though. It is very fragile, and I think that keeps it from being any better. It's very easy to kill. So it'll come in, it'll kill something, and then it'll probably die itself and maybe not make the best trades. So that's why it's a B tier model. And plus, in general, I think flyers are just kind of underwhelming. Next up is the Ravager, and I think the Ravager is B tier as well. Now, the reason why I think this isn't because I don't think the Ravager is good, but for the same cost, you can get Scourges, and Scourges essentially do the same thing, but better because they can move, shoot, move. Ravagers are pretty fragile. Once they get out into the open, out in line of sight, there's nothing that can really get them back behind terrain except for strike and fade, which is only in real space raid. So, realistically, I think the Ravager is just kind of one of those models that, they made it a little more expensive. It's just not efficient enough, to warrant taking over Scourges. Especially, again, when you consider Scourges can just do so much more than the Ravager can. So 3 Dark Lances, just typically not enough to warrant taking it, to be honest. Okay, next up is the Tantalus. I really like the Tantalus, especially in this army, Sky Splinter Assault, and I want to put it in B tier. And actually, I think it's one of the models that only suffers from the fact that it is so big. It's such a big model. It's hard to hide. It's fairly fragile, but I think it's really good if you're playing on the right terrain. If you're playing on WTC terrain, there's no way this thing is going to be useful to you. If you're playing on Leviathan, you could make it work for sure. If you're playing on player place terrain or more open boards, this thing is, I would argue, much better. Especially since, you can throw a lot of shooting in that. You can buff it up with power through pain. Sky Splinter Assault has a lot of, options for transports. Give it a 4+ invul, for example, is on the table. So there's a lot of things that this can do. Sadly, I do think the Tantalus is going to go away when the Dark Eldar get their Codex, because it's a Forge World unit. But, it is pretty fun, and it's good in combat too. It's a actual threat in close combat. So I like this model. Little big, little clunky, not going to be the most useful on every type of terrain, but still a decent pick on certain boards. All right, on to the Venom. It has to be S tier. The reason why is because it not only splits up units, but it also has a lot of DACA, right? It has 2 splinter cannons, which are very effective. And in Sky Splinter Assault, it's basically going to be your go-to to carry units of 5 incubi. It's going to be your go-to to carry units of 5 witches. So you're definitely going to want to keep this in your army. Well, obviously, right? Because the whole detachment is based off of getting out of transports. So you're definitely going to want Venoms. And they're really small. The great thing about Venoms is they're small, easy to hide, and that really means a lot when you have a lot of them on the board. So it means you're able to kind of get out of line of sight and not be shot at too easily. So pretty good. And of course, the other thing is that Venoms allow units to jump back in them after they're done assaulting. So if your incubi charge in, clean up a unit, they can then jump back in the Venom afterward, which is really good. Okay, so the Raider is next. The Raider is an A-tier unit. It's good. It's going to be your go-to for carrying things like Coblite Warriors, big units like that. If you want to maximize pain token usage or stratagem usage, the Raider is going to be your go-to. It has an auto-advance 6 ability. It's decent. It's just not that maneuverable. It's not as small as the Venom. It's about double the length of the Venom typically, so it's a little bit harder to move around, which is why I put it in A tier instead of S tier, but it's still a good model. I think it's better with the point decreases. It was a little bit expensive before. It does also come with a Dark Lance, which, honestly, I think it probably needs another weapon. That's just me. Venom comes with 2 weapons. Why does the Raider only come with 1? I guess, it's just because of historically it has only ever had a Bright Lance, or Dark Lance, excuse me, but I don't know. I think they definitely need to think about putting another weapon on there of some kind, because it just doesn't really have a lot of firepower. But, it is pretty good. I'd put it in A tier. Not quite auto include, but very strong with certain units. Okay, next is the Beast Pack. So this little guy looks like a Hellion, but he's actually a Beastmaster. I think the Beastmaster is no doubt S tier. The Beast Pack is amazing. First of all, the Dark Eldar lack a unit with scouts, and this is their scouting unit. It's really durable for the cost. It's only 105 points, has like 20 plus wounds in the unit. Very durable for the cost. It has a lot of damage for the cost. It has a lot of models for the cost, so it can wrap transports early on in the game if your opponent lets them. They're very fast. They all count as beasts. So that means obviously that, again, you can move through ruins and stuff like that, charge through ruins, and, you could basically tie up a bunch of enemy units if they're not careful. If your opponent doesn't screen effectively, a beast pack can be very disruptive. And like I said, I don't think there's a single scenario against a single enemy army out there that a beast pack is not a good choice, and not a choice that can do something for you on the battlefield, right? They're always going to have a purpose, they're always going to have a use, and they're really good. So beast pack, definitely S tier. The only thing keeping them back is really their availability, right? They're not really available on the website. You can't really buy these. You have to either proxy them, or you have to 3D print them, or find old models on eBay. They're very hard to get. But yeah, Beast Pack is still pretty awesome and definitely an S tier unit. Void Raven Bomber, in my opinion, good, but just too expensive. I have to put it in B tier, possibly even C tier. And I think the biggest draw to it is that it has this void mine that's really powerful, but fortunately you have to move over an enemy unit to use it, and it can't do that at a reserve. So, if I'm playing against Dark Eldar player with a Void Riven Bomber and I know what that thing does, it's just not going to survive to deploy that Void Mine, and it's paying a lot of points to have those weapons. So I think it has some of the same strengths as the Razorwing Jetfighter in that it can ignore obscuring terrain and things like that, but it has a lot of weaknesses in its cost and durability, and it also just can't use its ability. I would actually rank it below the Razorwing Jetfighter and maybe even C tier, to be honest. But I'm just being a little bit kind to it because it's a really cool model, and I think it can work. It's just too expensive, for my taste personally. 215 points is a lot, but I think it's, it can be decent, especially with, pain token usage and stuff like that, it can do a lot of damage. But the question you have to ask yourself is it going to do 215 points worth of damage before it dies, or is it going to perform some other useful thing, like killing a key unit or something like that? And I think it probably can, but it's a little bit dicey. So, not the best unit, but definitely something that could work. Okay, the Talos. The Talos is an A tier unit, and I actually think it's probably closer to S tier in the real space raid because of the stratagem support. But in general, I think it's an A tier unit. It is good. They have haywire blasters, which are extremely good against vehicles, which are also twin linked, by the way, twin linked haywire blaster, and you can take 2 of them per unit. They're very tough, toughness 7, 3+ save with a 5+ feel no pain. So they don't go down easily. And really, I think the only weakness of these guys is their mobility. Movement 7, they have the fly keyword, so it's really hard for them to even move over terrain to begin with that really low movement value. And, yes, they are tough, but they can be taken down, especially if they don't have that stratagem support. That -1 to wound really does help them in the real space raid. And there's just no incentive to take them in anything else but real space raid, really. If you're taking them for damage, you have Incubi, which are better at dealing damage than Talos in something like, Sky Splinter Assault. I think they're still good. I think, they're a powerful bully unit that can work well in the midboard, especially with the twin-linked liquefier guns that they have, which are, twin-linked flamers, essentially, with AP -1. That's really good, no doubt about it. And they just deal a lot of damage in general. They're very pain token efficient too, because once they kill something, they're empowered for the rest of the battle. So solid unit overall. I would say overall A tier. They're a little bit better in real space raid, because of that stratagem support really, but they're still pretty good in the other types of lists. I just don't think they play well with the fast, lightning quick play style of Sky Splinter Assault, because again, they are pretty slow. Rax is up next. Rax actually, this may be controversial. I think they're a C tier unit. I really don't like Rax that much. I feel like most Dark Eldar players just take them to basically be trash, but they're actually more expensive than a lot of other trash units in the index. So I'll go into why later, but a unit of Reavers costs about the same. I think these guys are 65 points if I'm not mistaken, and Reavers cost 60. So, those are both arguably units that are, trash style units that are meant for, just scoring objectives, quick objectives, and, getting on, forcing your opponent's hand in certain ways. And Rax just don't really do a good job. They do give you a pain token when they die. They're probably never going to kill an enemy unit, so you don't have to worry about that part of it. They do gain extra pain tokens when they kill something, but are they really ever going to kill something? Probably not. Their damage is very low. In general, I just think they're kind of a meh unit. You can run them in a squad of 10 with a Homunculus and you can kind of kit them out, but at that point you're spending, 120, 130 points plus the cost of the Homunculus, plus the cost of the transport. They get really expensive and they're not that, they're easy to take down. The 5+ feel no pain is a little bit, it's deceptive because it seems like they're tough, but they don't have the armor that a Talos or Kronos has, so they're not anywhere near as durable. So I'd put them in C tier. I don't really like them. I know people would probably put them above that because they do allow you to gain a pain token, but I just think there's better ways of gaining pain tokens, right? Like instead of spending 65 points on this, you can buy 3 Reavers and, maybe pop something, a lone operative early and get a pain token that way, So I definitely think they're not the greatest unit comparatively. Okay, speaking of, I mentioned Reavers a lot of times. I think Reavers are pretty much A tier. I think they're great. 60 points for 3 of them. When they move over enemy units, they deal mortal wounds. So you roll 3 dice, 4+, that's a mortal wound, which is pretty good. Again, pretty decent at chipping off wounds on things. But the most important part about these guys is they're fast. They're movement 16. They can get to anywhere on the board that they really want to. I think they're actually better in real space raid, believe it or not, because of strike and fade, meaning they can kind of like go across the board very quickly and just score secondaries like no other. Moving 32 inches plus an advance move, of D6, it's insane. These guys are really quick. They can also take a heat lance, which is good at popping, light vehicles in one hit, but also good at popping characters. If an opponent has a lone operative out there, these guys can just pop it very easily. They're not great in combat, but they don't really have to be good in combat because, they just need to tie something up. They have OC2, which means they can steal objectives as well. I would think of them kind of like an alternative to Wind Riders, actually. I think Wind Riders are a really good unit. These guys don't have the damage that Wind Riders do, but they certainly have the utility, and they're cheaper. So I really like this unit a lot. Definitely an A tier unit. I think in Sky Splinter Assault, there's just other units that can probably do the job. Maybe you have one of these units, but in Real Space Raid with that Strike and Fade, being able to move 32 inches across the board to score something, really, really good. Next is the Court of the Archon. I think the Court of the Archon, believe it or not, A tier. Now the reason why I say this is because the Court of the Archon combined with Cobalite Warriors and an Archon in Sky Splinter Assault can actually do a lot. Basically, when they get out of the transport, they're ignoring cover. They're, possibly getting sustained hits too because of the stratagem that can be targeted with. The Archon's allowing them to reroll all wounds because they're empowered. They're rerolling all hits. So at that point, you have a super shooting unit that's really, really good. And arguably, they're more, durability is not a really important thing in Dark Eldar, but they do make that 5-man Cobalite unit more durable. And I definitely think that using 5 of these with 5 Cobalites in a Raider is something you want to consider. It is a little CP intensive to get out, use that stratagem for shooting, and then use the stratagem to hop back in the Raider. But, it's a really powerful combo if you can get it off and if you can be sneaky about it. So I actually think these guys are one of the hidden gems of the index. They just, especially in Sky Splinter Assault, they buff the Cobalite Warriors that they come with so well. And because you can split units, you can have a Venom and you can split a unit of Cobalite Warriors and, put all the special weapons and stuff with the Court of the Archon, put them in the Raider, and then you can put all the Splinter Rifles in a Venom or something else like that, and that can go off and do actions, so I think that's very flexible as well. Grotesques. D tier. Now, why do I say Grotesques are D tier? I know some people might say that they're probably better than this, but I just think that, one, they're pretty slow. They're not that fast. If on foot. If you put them in a transport, they count as 3 slots each, so you can only fit like 3 of them in a Raider, which is very unfortunate. You can't put a Homunculus in the unit, so there's no way that they can get buffed by Homunculus at all. And they're too expensive. I think they're 90 points for 3 of them. They're 30 points a piece. And that, to me, is just too much, right? If you compare them to, like, say, Wraith Blades are, for 5 of them, it's 170. So, yeah, that's a little bit more expensive by a little bit than these guys. But, yeah, I definitely pay just 10 points more for a much better unit, right? Because what I mean by that is you have 5 Wraith Blades, right, at 170, so they're about 32 points per model. These guys are 30 points per model. Yeah, I definitely pay, the extra little bit of points to have a much better unit. And these guys are they're just not that tough also, right? Like, yeah, they have a lot of wounds, but, against damage to weapons, they really suffer. I think these guys are marginally better in Real Space Raid, but not by much. You're always better off going with a Talos, in my humble opinion. So, Grotesques, D tier. Can't be transported easily, I think really they just look cool, but they're not really actually good. Okay, let's talk about Urian Rakarth. So Urian Rakarth, I think he's B tier. I mean, he's okay, right? I mean, he can resurrect wounds to a Talos or Kronos, which is decent. He can, revive himself, which is good. And I think that's probably his best point, is that he can revive himself like a Fuegan character. But the issue with him is he's not that durable himself, right? He's not a 2+ armor save model like Fuegan is. And he just doesn't have the damage potential either, right? He doesn't do a lot of damage. So the revive is cool, but it's something that is just basically by itself. Yes, he can give wounds back to, Taloses and Kronoses also, which is nice, but it's not a game-winning thing usually. So yeah, I think he's okay, B tier. I think his revivability alone makes him B tier, and I just think other than that, he's just unremarkable. Okay, normal Homunculus, C tier. Why C tier? I think his buffs are great, but the only unit he can join is Rax, and Rax suck. So he doesn't really make the Rax that much better, and he's not that good on his own, right? If you just have him out there, by himself, he's not that good. So yeah, just think it's C tier. If you could join Grotesques, if you could join, units of or Kronos, that would be awesome. You'd be much better if you could do that, but you can't. So C tier. I actually think Homunculus should be able to join Talos or Kronos because, the Spirit Seers can join Wraith Lords, so why can't the Homunculus join the Talos, right? That would make a lot more sense. I think if these guys were better leaders, if they could lead more units, they'd be way better. But unfortunately, they can't, so C tier for him. The Succubus, A tier. Now, the Succubus doesn't do anything in Real Space Raid, really. It's just not a good model, but in Sky Splinter Assault, it's really points efficient. 45 points, and it gives the whole unit additional AP, which is amazing. And sustained hits 1, right? So that's really good. It's a decent model itself at dealing damage with a poison to 3+ weapon, anti-infantry weapon. So really just good at infantry killing. And I think when you have a Succubus and 5 Witches, that comes out to 90 points. And for that cost, it easily outtrades most other units, infantry units in the game. Even things like Terminators. You charge into a unit of Terminators with a unit of 5 Witches, empowered, coming out with the Succubus, you're killing about 2 to 3 Terminators on charge. And I know that seems bizarre. It's like, oh, no way, Proxy Hammer. But without defensive stratagem support, you're killing about 2 to 3 Terminators. It means they trade up almost every single time they charge in. They're also getting a 4+ invul save if they do that against that Terminator unit. So yeah, the Terminators strike back, but are they going to kill many Witches? Probably not. Probably kill like 2. And then you strike back again and kill another Terminator, right? And it's just you slowly grind down that unit over the course of, a couple turns. Now, obviously, if you're charging into a unit of 10, that unit of 10 is going to turn around and just belt you. But if you're charging into a small unit of Terminators, a shooty variant, you can very easily beat that unit over the course of a couple turns. So Succubus, I think, is a really good bargain. And I would even go so far as to say, running her by herself might even be good because she's so cheap. She's only 45. So you can use her as a, action junkie. And, yeah, pretty good pick, I think, for any Sky Splinter Assault list. Hellions, I think, are B tier. I think they're cheap enough to work. I just don't think they're good enough into terrain. They don't interact well with terrain. They don't have a ton of AP damage. They do have damage to weapons. They are fast. But again, it's like the Shining Spear problem. What's wrong with Shining Spears? They don't interact well with terrain. Reaver or Hellions are the same exact way. So nothing more to be said about these guys. I think if they interacted with terrain like infantry, like if they counted as jump infantry instead of mounted, they'd be much better. But as of now, just they don't interact well with terrain, and that's their issue. Mandrakes are S tier. I don't even have to go into, well, I will go into why, but a lot of you guys already know why they're so good. The reason why they're so good is because they have this Skyleap ability, essentially, into the shadows. They can melt back into the shadows and go back into reserve at the end of your opponent's turn, which means they can, come basically anywhere on the board the next turn, which is good. It's great for secondary objectives. They have infiltrate, so they're good at scoring early. They can tie things up just like the beast pack can early on in the game. And I think if you're going to go with a beast pack, you definitely need one of these units to, help screen out a certain area of the board so your beasts can actually use their scout move. Overall, Mandrake's great unit. Their combat ability is not great, their shooting ability is not great, but they're not for that. They're mainly objective based, and they're very cheap. 65 points is not a lot to pay for them. Okay, Scourges. S tier. Not much to say about these guys except they can carry some of the best heavy weapons the Dark Eldar Index has to offer, Dark Lances and Haywire Blasters. That's what you're going to want to go with on these guys. Occasionally, if you're running Ynnari or something, you might want to go with Splinter Cannons for that, good Blade Storm goodness. But typically you're going to give them Dark Lancers or Haywire Blasters in Druhkari. And, the move, shoot, move. It's really powerful. It's really strong. They're pretty fast. They're not durable at all, but the move, shoot, move makes them extremely good at being able to not only kill enemy units, enemy large targets, but, also duck back to safety. And here's the other thing, is that the leader, the Solarite, has an assault weapon. So these guys in a pinch can actually score objectives as well, being, an infantry unit that has fly. It's very fast. So yeah, definitely S tier unit. Don't need to explain why. Move shoot move's really powerful. The meta is revolving around vehicles. They destroy, they slaughter vehicles very easily with Haywire Blasters, and the Dark Lancers are very good as well. Witches. Controversial. A tier. Only in Sky Splinter Assault though. I think in the other detachment they're C tier, or maybe, B tier, but only because they're cheap. Now, the reason why they're so good in Sky Splinter, Lance is a really powerful ability on low strength models, because it means they're always, at the very least, going to be wounding on a 5+. That's really good for a cheap unit. They're only 90 points for 10, which is cheap. They have AP -1 base, but they get additional AP when they're empowered, which is really good. So they're striking at AP -2. And I think if you have a Succubus or Lilith, they're doing, AP -3. So they're really good with characters as well. You definitely want a Succubus in there, or Lilith. Lilith, of course, is just super OP, but, having a Succubus, it makes them very cost effective as well. Right? Succubus is just much cheaper. So, witches, I really like them a lot. Their abilities, whatever, but I mean, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of instances where your opponent wants to fall back, but won't be able to, because the witches are really good at forcing those, desperate escape tests to fail. Basically, if the unit is battle shocked, if they want a desperate escape, they, on a 1 or a 2, they just die, right? I've had this actually happen against opponents many times, right? They want to fall back. They're like, all right, take desperate escape tests, and they fail the ones that they need to pass, right? So they end up dying. So I think, giving a -1 or just forcing enemies to take desperate escape, whether they're battle shocked or not, is really powerful. Okay, next up is the Kronos. Kronos is S tier. And simply because you need a Kronos in your army. You need at least one. They're only 50 points. They give you great pain token regeneration. Basically, every time you use a pain token within range of the Kronos, you roll a dice. On a 4+, you get it back. That's really needed. That's very helpful. They're also not bad as far as their damage goes. They can screen out your backfield fairly easily at the same time. So yeah, I think, basically a Kronos is needed in every list, and therefore it's going to go S tier plus. It has that tentacle to goodness that, every anime enjoyer loves. Okay, so the next unit is Complight Warriors. Also an S tier unit. Sticky objectives, lots of special weapons. What's not to like about these guys? You put them with an Archon, they're doing a lot of shooting damage. You have anti-infantry 3+ on their Splinter Rifles. They're just good. Quite simply, they're just good, solid battle line unit. Nothing bad to say about them. They are fragile, but they do a lot of damage. And, they are 110 points, which is now more expensive than most of the battle line units in the game. But I think they definitely make up for this with the combination of sticky objectives and the massive amount of special and heavy weapons that they can have. I mean, they can take 4 weapons in the unit. 2 special weapons and 2 heavy. So that's really good. Alright, Lilith is next, and Lilith is actually the last model on our list, and she's S tier. My god, she is S tier. Why is she S tier? Because she can eliminate entire units of Marines by herself. She doesn't need help. She can eliminate them all. She absolutely is a beast. She can destroy units of Custodes very easily as long as they fail their 4+ invul saves, right? She does not care. She can rip through units with anti-infantry 3+. She's very good. Obviously, out of a raider, she's even better because she's getting +1 to wound. Don't think that matters on anti-infantry, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I don't think so, though. I think that mostly when she's empowered, getting that -1 AP, that's when she's going to be at her strongest, doing a bunch of damage, forcing people to their invul saves, or just, in general, making them save on a 6+, right? Space Marines saving on a 6, they're just not going to survive. She's extremely good. So, yeah, I think that's it. And here's, I think, one of the main problems with Dark Eldar. They just don't have a lot of units. If we're doing an Eldar video, we'd have we'd be talking about this for hours. But Dark Eldar, there's just not that many units. They had more units, but GW took away a lot of them because they shared kits. So, things like Coblite Warriors used to be Trueborn. Trueborn could take more special weapons. Trueborn had better abilities and stuff like that. Well, yeah, it's from the same kit, and I know it's the same unit and stuff, but by limiting that datasheet to only include Coblite Warriors, you're really limiting the potential of the army, right? And I think that's really where Dark Eldar struggle. They're just, in competitive play, in the beginning when the Dark Eldar got the Sky Splinter Assault, I thought they were going to be one of the top 3 factions. And I have to say, I was wrong, but the reason I was wrong isn't because Sky Splinter is not good. It's because the Dark Eldar are just easy to counter. And if you look at the armies, they were doing really well, right? Necrons and Custodes. Both of those armies are extremely good into Dark Eldar. So Dark Eldar win rate kind of was hampered a little bit. The other thing is, Dark Eldar are really one-dimensional, right? They do have some tricks. They are hard to pull off and play, but they're mostly an assault army. They're going to try to get into an assault with you. They're going to use terrain to their advantage. So anything that's fast enough to kind of go around the objectives and shoot them, or just, blow them off the table with indirect fire is going to be really good against them. One of the things that I think is the most challenging for Dark Eldar is stuff like D-cannons, right? Because you just can't do anything against it. You end up losing 3 transports a turn, 3 venoms a turn, and you just can't recover from that because your whole detachment is based off of having transports alive. So if an army has that, or you go against Imperial Guard and they just basilisk you out of off the board, right? 1 basilisk destroys 1 venom per turn. It's absolutely insane. So there are things that just counter this army really hard, and I think that's what their main problem is. But against Marine armies, against certain builds like that, they tend to do very well. It's just the problem of, they're not diverse enough. The other kind of unfortunate thing is that, they don't have a lot of Forge World. They only have the Tantalus, and the Tantalus is going to probably go away along with a lot of other Forge World stuff from other armies. So they're going to lose even more units. So the real question is, what do Dark Eldar need to be more competitive in the long run and have more longevity? And I think the answer to that is just more units. They just need more units. There's so many units they can bring back from past editions. It's insane. They can bring back stuff, right? They can definitely bring back stuff. I know the roster doesn't seem that big, but I think there's a lot of characters that they used to have that they can bring back. Obviously, Vect, for example, you can bring back. You can bring back Cruella de Vil. I mean, come on. By the way, guys, if you're ever in for, want to look at a little bit of a treat, Google search, type in Google, Cruella de Vil Dark Eldar, and you will get a little bit of a treat for yourself. Really cool model. But obviously hasn't been in the codex for a long time. And I don't even know if I'm pronouncing this right, but Kaldruka is another freaking cool model. The Mandrake, and he's in the lore and everything. He's the Mandrake, I guess, warlord or whatever. And he just is a head taker. He just takes a bunch of heads. And his whole thing is he wants to build enough, he wants to like collect enough skulls to, basically become one with the shadows or something like that. Anyway, I'm not too big on the lore, but it's something like that. It's really cool. I think it's awesome. So there's a lot of Dark Eldar characters they can bring in. They can bring in new units. They can spread. They can split the data sheets with witches and Coblite warriors. Have Coblite Trueborn again. Have witch blood brides again, and I just think they can do so much more. I mean, there's so many new units they can create too, because the Dark Eldar are, especially among the Homunculus covens. So you have your Racks, you have your Grotesques, Talos, and Kronos, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, Homunculus are, masters of flesh crafting. They can make whatever they want to. So you could have different, units come out of the Homunculus covens and just be absolutely insane. So I think there's a lot of room for the Dark Eldar to grow. I hope they do grow. And just to you guys out there, I do want to still do Dark Eldar content. That's not going away. I've just been more concentrated on Eldar, to be honest, because that's what I've been playing. I haven't been playing a lot of Dark Eldar. But I'm going to be doing some more Dark Eldar videos. I'm going to be doing some more Ynnari videos with Dark Eldar units. So definitely stay tuned for those. And I think that's going to be it for today's video. Not a very long video, talking about just in general where I think their units stand. But, let me know if you disagree with any of these choices. Let me know if I missed anything, and I'll be sure to include it in future videos. Alright everybody, that's going to be it for today. And by the way, if you like this content and you want to support the channel on Patreon, you definitely can. I have free trials activated. I want to thank everybody who has supported on Patreon. Thank you so much. You've helped the channel grow significantly. And I will leave the link for that in the description if you do want to support the channel. Now, supporting the channel will grant you access, permanent access, I should say, to our Discord server. So we do talk about Dark Eldar stuff as well as Eldar stuff. So we definitely are looking for more Dark Eldar players. So if you are interested in joining the Discord, it's absolutely free. It's in the description. Alright everybody, that's going to be it for today. Final time. I'll see you guys next time, and have a good one. Peace out.